Star Wars 7x7, episode 2765. Thanks to Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, we actually found out a lot more about the background of Mandalorian activities that are very relevant to the storyline in the Mandalorian series. And so we're going to talk about that, parse it, kind of narrow down the potential for when some of these major events took place, and also talk about the perils of trying to place these considering all the other storytelling that's happened before. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, Return of the Mandalorian was Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, which we talked about yesterday, and we did not talk in detail about the story that the Armorer tells. We just kind of glossed over the main details of it, basically. But I thought today would be a good day for our deeper dive into the episode of the Book of Boba Fett that just happened, for us to look at the story she tells and the particular details of it, because it's been a bit of a mystery ever since Moff Gideon made reference to this event, the Night of a Thousand Tears, back in season 1 of The Mandalorian. There's been a, ooh, what's that? Star Wars has a great way of dropping these little mystery elements, dating all the way back to Lando going, somebody must have told him about my little maneuver at the Battle of Tanab, right? So everybody's like, what's the Battle of Tanab? Well, same thing with this whole Night of a Thousand Tears. They do that really well. But the Night of a Thousand Tears is actually just one part of a larger piece of Mandalorian history called the Great Purge, in which the Empire essentially committed genocide, nearly wiped out all Mandalorians, and very few survived. I assume that it's not just the cloister of Children of the Watch that were hiding out on Concordia that survived, because obviously Bo-Katan survived as well, and I doubt she was hiding out on Concordia, right? And the Night of a Thousand Tears in specific seems to refer to the Empire's bombardment of Mandalore. In Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, in talking with Bo-Katan and Koska Reeves and the Mandalorian, when they talk about Mandalore, he says, Mandalore, the Empire turned that planet to glass. So this would be part of the whole Great Purge of Mandalore and the Night of a Thousand Tears offensive that we saw in this flashback sequence in Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, with all the TIE bombers flying in and that giant bubble-shaped thing that they're attacking. Well, Mandalore had domed cities, and presumably that particular one is Sundari, which is the capital domed city of Mandalore. And also, as part of that flashback sequence, we got a very Terminator-like scene with the KX security droids wandering through the wreckage and shooting survivors, and the probe droids floating around, providing light for the KX droids. Yeah, very awful and apocalyptic, and well executed from a storytelling perspective. So one of the big mysteries, and there are multiple mysteries about the Night of a Thousand Tears and the Great Purge of Mandalore, because there's so much we don't know about it, but one of the things that's currently up for debate, up for wonder, is when exactly it took place. So we can kind of narrow down a little bit. The final episode in which Mandalore appears in Star Wars Rebels, where Bo-Katan actually receives the Darksaber, that takes place in about 1 BBY, so 1 year before the Battle of Yavin. And then the reason why I'm going to say I think the high end of this is 4 ABY is because after the Emperor's death, he initiated Operation Cinder to destroy a bunch of planets and whatnot. And this is not how Operation Cinder was designed to go. What we saw in that flashback sequence involving all those TIE bombers bombing the cities and whatnot, that did not look like an Operation Cinder kind of situation. Operation Cinder basically was the destruction of worlds through other, geological or climatological means. And that is not at all what we see happening in that flashback sequence. So I'm very certain that it's not an Operation Cinder thing, which means that it has to have happened before the Emperor died. So we're talking between 1 BBY and 4 ABY. So now we've narrowed it down by, into a 5-year period. So here's where things get tricky. Yes, the Mandalorians dealt the Empire a major blow during those Rebels episodes that happened in 1BBY, you could possibly jump to the conclusion that the Empire saw that happen and said, okay, yeah, we're not going to stand for this, and that's when they launched the Purge. If that were the case, then you would think that someone in Star Wars Rebels would have said something about this through the rest of the season, because those events happened in the beginning of season 4. So you would think that would have been communicated, and it wasn't. It didn't appear in the series, so it kind of leans you toward no, probably didn't happen until after the events of A New Hope. And the thing that seems to suggest this event may have taken place in the months prior to or the months following the events of A New Hope is that in subsequent Star Wars storytelling, in other words, getting past A New Hope, you don't run into a lot of Mandalorians. And there was this Great Purge after all, and the few remaining survivors were scattered across the galaxy, and it seems that they pretty much all went into hiding so that way they wouldn't be discovered and killed by the Empire, kind of similar to Alderaanians in a way. And so that could be a natural explanation for why we see precious few Mandalorians, if any, in the galaxy in the years from 0 to 4 ABY. But the problem with trying to guess at these things, the danger, as I suggested earlier, is that Star Wars storytelling can only plan so far ahead, right? So the fact that they are talking about this Great Purge happening, you go back to 2019 when The Mandalorian initially premiered, and you would figure they had some sense of what that event was, and so may have been thinking about it as early as 2018, perhaps even back into 2017, but there's been official Star Wars storytelling happening for 40 years, even when you consider that they still have a rebooted canon or whatever, but there's still a lot of storytelling that's there and valid, and they had been doing comics with Star Wars, rebooted comics for a couple of years, and telling stories in between Star Wars and Empire, in between A New Hope and Empire, I should say. But when you plan that far ahead, you can't necessarily go back and retcon stuff. So it may be the case that as Princess Leia is bopping around the galaxy doing rebellion stuff in between A New Hope and Empire, maybe she's heard about what happened to Mandalore, but it just hasn't come up in conversation. I mean, they're not documenting her every single moment and move in these comics. So yeah, it's possible that it happened and they're just not discussing it. So if you've ever been thinking, gosh, a Great Purge of Mandalore is like a huge event, we should have heard something about this, somebody should be talking about this in other Star Wars storytelling. Well, yeah, it may be that they just didn't think about it until further on down the line, and so now they're going to have to find a moment to work it in with some other characters or something like that, but it just hasn't happened yet. So based on the logic I'm applying to this, I'll put a stake in the ground and say that the Great Purge happened no later than 1 ABY, and I'd love to hear what you think. If you think that is somewhat on the mark, if you think it happened later, earlier, what have you, I'd love to hear your opinions about it. So please leave a comment wherever you're catching this episode, or if there's in the comment section, you can't necessarily comment on podcasts on some places, head over to sw7x7.com and find this show on there. It'll be labeled very neatly, episode 2765. Drop a comment there and let me know what you think. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.